something else. And the elder part, and now we have two attorneys. Here, and so we're trying to set court systems, and we have welfare systems, we have regulatory systems, we have allow our health people going around measuring temperatures, food, things of this sort that for all the food vendors. We have, we have all of this system we need to set up, and we have to coordinate with federal agencies, and that are the primary regulatory body for the tribe. And that's based on the U.S. Constitution and the fact that tribe have a direct relationship with the federal government and the Constitution. And only subsequently of some is delegated, that's delegated some to the state, which is one of the reasons that tribe have a mission. The feds delegate business permit to the state. The state says they don't have the responsibility to consult with the tribes. And yet the feds have, we tell the feds you can't delegate their responsibility. If you don't delegate that responsibility, consult with the tribes in the process, then that ability to consult and also biggest example is my first job in Harvard asking where the tribe had signed, the state signed full arms agreement. Then they discovered after they had a lot of stuff up and golf course, they discovered pH of 13 on pH. The burn on your feet walking on it. And so, and usually it dilutes 100 feet in short pH still. And so this was a serious issue. And when the state decided, well, I'm just the state gets at least clean it up. That's about all they could do. And so, chairman, I called the EPA. The EPA could tell them. So we had this meeting room, 40-some people around the table, everybody doing this with the potential responsible parties. And consumers' energy to, but it's agreed to take it out. They spent $1 million in the and to their credit, they've done a good job of everything that they had. But midway through the process, the director of the environmental quality, I sent the deputy director, Mr. Chairman, the director, we'd like them to be the lead agency on this thing. I said, thanks so much. So because of that, the tribe had this direct federal relationship that we were able to help facilitate that cleanup. The state is now in charge of the process that was put up. But we made sure that that whole twist of delegation of authority came to light during that whole time period. So this was something we did when I was chairman over 20 years ago. We're really not trying to help that. And there's other examples of that. So I thought I'd pass that on a little. I've been part of this Boston's government for him since we started. So I've been around a little while to listen to everything. I do tell people I'm not a scientist. I'm a tribal politician, modern. So I feel that's the basic of things. But I've been around scientists and attorneys and so on. I actually be an attorney sometimes. So anyway. I'm going to eat my breakfast.
All right. Thanks for letting us jump in on that. Let's get back to your.
We do have AWE on the line, so I'll finish up our committee update and then go to the presentations. So just a couple updates on some of the recommendations that we've been implementing from prior Water Use Advisory Council reports. For 2022, the ag irrigation energy efficiency administered by the Water Use Assessment Unit. And then, I don't know if, Janine Royhofer is on from MSU Extension, but she's going to give us a real brief update on the 2020 water conservation efficiency practices and ad. So we can unmute her.
Thanks,
Janine?
Emily. Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, yeah, so thanks for the opportunity to give a brief update. We have 2 extension educators who have been hired. One started almost a year ago and one started about 14 or 15 months ago. So Angie Gradas and Brendan Kelly are the 2 water use efficiency irrigation educators. They've been busy attending different workshops, and they've started hosting ones where they're the major planners and presenters and bringing in other presenters. So they had a successful irrigation workshop at KBS in Hickory Corners on August 1st. They have other events that are still upcoming this year that they'll be presenting at, including the Blueberry Field Day. They've been participating and presenting at other MSU Extension Field Days in collaboration with some of our other staff as well, including the National Christmas Tree meeting that was held near Lake City at the end of July, the Potato Field Day last week. And they've also been part of several of the MEEP and Conservation District meetings, doing some uniformity tests and education in that front. They've been working on educational resources. There's recently been a bulletin published on gallons to inches conversion. They're sharing and working with farmers on the irrigation scheduler app that is available both for Android and Apple platforms. And they're working on updating the website for irrigation resources so that it's more user-friendly as well as accessible. And then they're starting to do additional planning for winter meetings. They're planning a session for the Great Lakes Expo in December. And they're also wrapping up a needs assessment that's being conducted to find out the needs of growers related to irrigation and large water withdrawals. And they will also be visiting with our committee on October 2nd and planning their next meeting with the consultative committee. Are there any questions?
Dave has a question.
Just a question, I heard there were some cuts with MSU extension. I saw some of the federal cuts. Is that affecting any water related programs?
Not at this point. So at this point, the cuts are related to SNAP Ed. So the SNAP education teaching related to nutrition and healthy activity, physical activities, that funding was removed from the federal budget. And so the program was left in, but left unfunded. So as of September 30th, there will be 94 people let go from MSU Extension, as that program does not have funding. It's a tremendous loss to our organization and the communities and the partners that they work with, but not specifically related to water at this point.
Any other questions for our committee? Yes, I can do that. Andy and Hannah will be reporting on that irrigation water and energy efficiency pilot program that's been before, and we'll both be working to administer that project. So we'll look forward to getting more updates as that gets included. And I think we're ready to turn it over to Alliance for Water. We can switch back to that presentation, but we've got our 2 speakers on the line. So we've been working with Alliance for Water Efficiency for about a year.
Emily, excuse me, do they have a presentation that they want to share? Okay, I'll stop sharing.
They can take it from there. So this is a project that we co-funded with some funding from the Office of the Great Lakes and the Water Use Advisory Council that's been taking a look at water conservation GMPs and innovation and technological advancements and opportunities that we can learn from others. And also look at some of our water intensive industries and water sectors in the state. There's a much larger team that we've been working with from Alliance for Water Efficiency. So we just had a couple of them today that'll be presenting. We're in kind of the final stages of the grant, so we've just received a draft report from DWE and shared that with the committee. And we're reviewing and gathering comments, and those are due back to us Friday this week on August 15th. And then we'll be compiling those with our comments from the office, providing those back to Alliance for Water Efficiency to address in their final report. And then they'll submit a final report to us within 45 days of the end of the grant period. So that's kind of from an administrative standpoint, the process. But they have presented a longer version of this presentation to our water conservation efficiency committee. And then we also met with them earlier, I think in February, came to give us some additional updates on progress. So we're excited to have them give a presentation today. Our two presenters are Devin Smith and Amanda Kristoff. And I think they'll be kind of tag teaming the presentation. And then we'll have some time for questions. So we have about, I think, 30 minutes or so. But given their slides that I've seen and that we
Thank you, Emily. Can you hear me okay?
sounds a little difficult to hear.
Little difficult to hear.
That's perfect.
That's better.
That's better.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much for the introduction, and it's great to be here with you all this afternoon in this virtual space. Thank you, Devin, for sharing slides. First of all, I want to start off just by saying it's been a real pleasure to work with the EGLE team and the WUAC committee on this effort. And we're grateful to contribute to this work across the state, and are looking forward to sharing what we've found and seeing how you all use it in the future. So we've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to dive in, and then, like Emily mentioned, we'll have time for questions at the end. But if any questions pop up throughout the presentation, that's great too. You can always stop us and ask. Go ahead on the next slide, Devin. So we've met some of you all before, but if you haven't met us yet, this was the core project team from the Alliance for Water Efficiency that worked on this project. I'm Amanda Kristoff. I'm program manager with AWE, joined by my colleague, Devin Smith and Ron Burke, who are also on the call. So I'll just pause real quick if y'all want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, y'all. Devin Smith, researcher with AWE. I'll be presenting the second half of this presentation. I want to thank you all for having us today, and excited to share our work with you.
Yeah, hello, Ron Burke. I'm CEO at AWE. And again, I'll just echo the thanks that Amanda and Devin have already shared with you. This has been an exciting project. We've learned a lot, and I think you're going to find that the results are illuminating in some ways that hopefully will help the state down the road. So thanks.
And then our last colleague, Lisa Hans, formerly director of programs, is no longer on staff, but she supported this project. And on call, we have Joanna Dakota Smith, who is our newest team member, is on the call just to learn a little bit more about this project as well. Next slide. And then I also want to acknowledge our other project partners who supported this effort, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance and Bill Hoffman and Associates. Wonderful. So just to make sure that we're starting all from the same page, the primary goals for this project were to gather examples of the implementation and review processes for the generally accepted 2008 water conservation best management practices across all of Michigan's water use sectors. And then also document innovative solutions and strategies that are advancing water conservation and efficiency goals. And lastly, to foster peer-to-peer learning amongst the sustainability leaders across the water use sectors. And while we explored and engaged with all of the water use sectors, we primarily focused on engagement and research with the business and industrial water use sectors, and we'll dive into that later. Next slide. And our framework for this project was mainly organized into 3 main buckets or tasks and strategies. To accomplish the goals I just mentioned, the research team engaged with the BNI water use sectors, the non-BNI water use sectors, and then we also conducted external research on innovative best management practices. And all of these different approaches and angles are funneling down to provide y'all with an understanding of the current state as well as future opportunities for water conservation and efficiency across the state. Slide, please. And again, as a refresher, the 5 water use sectors here are those that were denoted in the original 2008 voluntary BMPs. And so these were the scope of our stakeholder engagement. Next slide. So I'm going to start by touching at a high level on some of the work and engagement that our team conducted with the non-BNI sectors. And I also want to mention this portion of the project was primarily led by our colleagues at the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. They're not on the call today, but they did fantastic work, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer more detailed questions if you have any after this presentation. Their engagement strategy primarily included reaching out to contacts that were previously identified by EGLE and the WUAC committee, as well as through some external research. They conducted semi-structured interviews with industry experts, followed by a qualitative analysis to pull out those common themes, trends, and opportunities. So I'm going to go over these at a high level, but these are detailed in the report, so you can explore those after. So generally speaking, where are these 3 non-BNI water use sectors in updating and reviewing the 2008 BMPs? We kind of broke it down here, but starting off with the public water supply, according to the stakeholders that we were engaged, and I'll preface this, that all of these are firsthand accounts from the interviews and not, prescriptive evaluations. But for the public water supply sector, there have been no formal updates of the BMP since 2008, although there have been groups of stakeholders in past years who have convened and attempted to review these, but the effort was not completed. Conversely, for the agricultural irrigation sector, this group has the most formal and robust process for reviewing and updating their BMPs. As I'm sure you are all familiar with the generally accepted agricultural management practices, or GAMPs, which are reviewed on an annual basis. And then lastly, in the non-agricultural irrigation sector, they too have not completed a formal industry-wide BMP review, but we're seeing that individual industries within the non-ag space are taking the lead to publish and update their own BMPs. And one example here is the golf course sector, and there are some groups within that industry that are taking the lead in water use efficiency. Next slide. And I'm going to go over some of the takeaways from the various engagements that were had with the non-BNI sector. First, as you just learned, each sector had varied approaches to updating their water efficiency best management practices, from annual systemic approaches with government oversight to ad hoc groups and national nonprofit involvement as well. Secondly, all the interviewees cited similar barriers for water efficiency adoption, namely resource constraints and education challenges with end users. Conversely, the motivators were more varied and they were more specific to each sector, but one of the through threads that did shine through all of the conversations were reductions in costs as being one of the main motivators, whether that's reduction in costs for infrastructure investments and operations or the embedded energy reductions associated with water use efficiency. Fourth, for all of the sectors and in all the conversations that were had, there did seem to be a strong desire to increase efficiency, but the resource constraints made formally updating the BMPs challenging. And despite these challenges, lastly, the interviewees also reflected on various opportunities to pathways and advancements in water use efficiency, and those being primarily expansion of public resources, outreach programs, and funding opportunities. And again, this was very high level, but we dive into each of these takeaways in more detail in the report and would be happy to answer any questions. For the sake of time, I'm going to pivot us to focus on the main portion of and focus of this project, which was our engagement with the business and industrial water use sectors. I'm going to start off with a summary of our engagement strategy and what came out of our engagement with the stakeholders, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Devin, who's going to provide more detail on the innovations of the actual BMPs. But again, just to make sure we are all on the same page, these are the 6 industries within the business and industrial sector that we focused on, which are a reflection of the industries that were outlined in the original 2008 BMP documents. Next slide. Thank you. Our engagement strategy and approach was varied, and our goal was to provide multiple pathways for stakeholders to participate, as you can see here listed on this slide. We discussed this in our report, but some of the methods have been more successful than others, and we've been able to gather different pieces of information from sectors through these varied approaches. And really the takeaway here is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to building these relationships, and finding what resonates with different audiences takes time and it's iterative. I also want to ground us in the fact that this was a mixed methods qualitative approach, which emphasizes insights through firsthand accounts and perspectives from industry stakeholders directly. And because this was exploratory, again, it's not a prescriptive evaluation or formal assessment of the 2008 BMPs. Just wanted to make sure we were grounded in that. Go ahead on the next slide. I'm going to go over, similarly to the non-BNI sector, I'm going to go over our key takeaways from all of the conversations and engagements we had with BNI stakeholders. The first one, and one of the key takeaways, is that water efficiency has largely been perceived as a co-benefit of other priorities and strategies. Stakeholders who participated in this project were not all aware of the 2008 water conservation and efficiency BMPs, but despite this, it was common that there were strategies being implemented. They just didn't see it in the context of these formally adopted BMPs. And they were co-benefits of other priority efforts such as energy efficiency improvements, cost reduction measures, wastewater management initiatives, and/or were tied to company-specific sustainability goals. Next slide, please. Another key takeaway is that water conservation and efficiency may not always be top of mind or the immediate priority to these stakeholders, given the range of other environmental and operational priorities that they must balance and manage. Through our conversations, challenges relating to water quality, again, wastewater management, stormwater, and energy efficiency often rose to the top. Some folks brought up the perception of abundant water as a barrier to garner that public and organizational support for these strategies, especially when the cost of these process improvements might be larger than the cost of paying for more water in the short term, right? Not in the long term. Next slide, please. Third, through our engagement strategies, we gleaned that sustained participation and engagement is a challenge, especially, that continued engagement over time. Sector-specific outreach often required multiple points of contact, repeated follow-up. Some folks were hesitant to share about internal practices and for fear of, perceived regulatory risks. One other insight that we think might have contributed to this is that many of these BMPs date back to 2008. So there might have been staff turnover that could contribute to that loss of institutional or historical involvement and knowledge. So the need to identify and support new internal champions might be something to consider going forward. And then again, no one size fits all approach. This requires flexibility, time, and the sensitivity to diverse capacities and motivations for this work. Next slide. We also find that data availability and quality remains a key challenge for folks. And many pointed to like understanding their water footprint as a first step to get engaged in this space. And Devin will speak later about benchmarking. Next slide. Corporate sustainability goals were a big pathway and motivator to get engaged in this space. If you could go to the next slide, Devin, I just wanted to share some of these visuals from some of the engagements that we had with stakeholders. As you can see on the figure to the left, a lot of the stakeholders we engaged do have established corporate environmental social governance or ESG goals. And they also reported being primarily motivated by their ESG goals to implement water saving strategies, as you can see on the figure to the right. And this was followed by water cost savings as a key motivator as well. And the real crux of this is that ESG goals create valuable opportunity to align water conservation efficiency with existing organizational commitments. So connecting those dots for the stakeholders. And another great opportunity is that companies with ESG goals are more likely to have dedicated staff who are focusing on sustainability. So these can be really great key points of contact for future and that sustained engagement to build institutional knowledge within an organization. Next slide. Another key takeaway, many of the stakeholders did express interest in exploring water stewardship opportunities. We gleaned a strong desire to learn more about available technologies and strategies that would support water reductions, in recognizing that most of their organizations do have the potential to improve efficiencies. It's just knowing what those opportunities are and how to get there. And then lastly, we also saw great success around leveraging existing industry groups. These can be key trusted messengers and really effective liaisons to connect with individual stakeholders in a way that's more challenging when you don't have an existing forum that's already dedicated to these broader environmental sustainability topics. And if you could go to the next slide. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but these are logos of different groups that are convening on the topic of water stewardship and sustainability and would be great opportunities to continue reaching folks on water conservation and efficiency. Next slide, Devin. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Devin to talk a little bit more in detail about the actual BMPs. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Really interesting engagement summary, so thank you for that. And I'm going to chat about the innovation in the business industry water use sector and the upcoming and trending best management practices around water conservation. But before I talk about the future, I want to take a moment to reflect on the 2008 BMPs and note how these are a really strong foundation. And innovation and trends in the BMPs and in water conservation and water use efficiency are building upon and enhancing these through utilizing new technologies, new access to information, like reusing water, reducing water use, tracking water, and as we've already mentioned and we'll continue to mention, benchmarking to improve upon what was already founded in 2008. So today I'm going to give a few examples from different industry sectors, and a few example companies of what they're doing to improve water conservation. We're going to start with recycling water in the pulp and paper industry. The pulp and paper industry is a very water intensive industry, starting with everything from stripping the bark on the tree to wood chipping to pulping. And there needs to be a lot of conservation practices considered. So examples are life cycle assessments, tracking water use and discharge within a facility, and implementing circular water use through process and design, which may look like capturing condensate from efficient boilers and reusing it throughout the facility in a different process, or utilizing conductivity controllers to monitor the blowdown water and cooling towers so that we can recycle water through a cooling system to its maximum capacity. Mills can also create recycled paper and products in order to reduce the portion of water used in the initial bark stripping and wood chip creating. And one of the newer technologies I've mentioned on this page is zero liquid discharge, where water is treated in-house in order to reduce the amount of water discharge back to the environment and just keeping it circulating through to maximize use. So our example here is International Paper. They're headquartered in Nashville and have a mill in Three Rivers, Michigan. International Paper prioritizes water conservation by meeting with stakeholders to note primary water concerns. They implement context-based water management strategies among plants, which is important for a company that has mills and plants all over the world in different geographies and climates. They're tracking water use with flow metering, conducting internal benchmarking to realize which plants are most efficient and which ones can improve efficiency. And in that, they've reduced their consumptive water use and now return 89% of water withdrawn from a watershed back to that same watershed rather than losing it to evaporation or an alternative process. And also some mills work on recycled municipal water, which is fantastic. Another example is drinking it in with the beverage industry. The beverage industry in Michigan can be big and small, everything from large food and beverage companies to the smaller craft beverage industry, which is growing. And water is incorporated into every component of the beverage industry, from the product to the packaging, production, and cleaning. So there are a lot of ways to maximize water conservation and efficiency in beverage factories, including installing appropriately sized equipment to reduce water use and energy needs, because energy is embedded in water production and cleaning. And so by reducing water use, there's also reducing energy needs and thereby saving costs. Water is also reused on site. For example, capturing steam as mentioned with the pulp and paper process and reusing it elsewhere within the plant, or optimizing clean in place or SIP systems to reuse water within those systems, or even removing water from the operation entirely and cleaning with gas or CO2 to clean pipes. So our example here is Terra Firma, a craft brewery in Traverse City, Michigan. This brewery reuses water from the brewing process for alternative uses on site. They also employ water capture from rainwater and treatment in order to maximize water use and reclaim over 500,000 gallons of water annually from manufacturing for irrigation of the hops on site. And they even capture heat in cooling processes and reuse it throughout the facility. I'll transition to electric utilities with cool off with water. In this, electric utilities mostly use water for cooling processes. And so the main component and potential for conservation is in the cooling tower operation. So in addition to incorporating water conservation into strategic planning, can increase the cycles of concentration in cooling towers in order to reuse cool water within a cooling system to its maximum capacity until it becomes so concentrated with dissolved solids that it begins to degrade equipment. In addition to reusing water, we can reduce the amount of water used through hybrid cooling processes that it uses both air and water cooling, and then adopting alternative energy. So our example on this slide is an AEP company, but in Michigan, it's Indiana Michigan Power. AEP monitors their water use, and they've reduced their total consumptive water use to less than 2% of the water they use across their power plants. In that, 48% of surface water pulled has been reduced since 2013, and there's been an 83% reduction of consumptive surface water use since 2013. They've also invested in alternative energies and incorporate water stewardship into their ESG goals. My last example here of a specific company is looking towards the future and thinking about big tech and water. So as AI increases, as data centers pop up, there needs to be a conversation about how to best utilize water in these systems and make sure we're using water the most efficient way possible. And so in that, water is used for cooling in data centers and big technology centers as well, similar to electric utilities. So water condensate can be captured and reused within the facility. Waterside economizers can be used to reduce the amount of energy needed to make water the temperature that the facility wants it. There are thermal storage operations and capturing water on site for use within the system. So in October 2024, Microsoft acquired land outside of Grand Rapids for data center development. So our example here is Microsoft. And Microsoft in its new data centers is utilizing a chip level cooling technology, meaning that technology is at a very fine scale, and recycling water through a closed loop system at a specific temperature in order to completely reduce evaporation. And what that means is that these data centers can reduce water use by up to 33 million gallons annually per facility. So these have been implemented across the United States and the world, and it's currently being implemented in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, where their current data center is being one of their current data centers is being built, and very may be coming soon to Michigan. So transferring to my last example here, we're taking a step back from a company and thinking about a concept, and that is benchmarking that we've mentioned a couple times. And benchmarking is comparing processes and performance metrics to industry best management standards and practices. And what it allows for is for companies to compare their efficiency and improve their efficiency by sharing their data and being transparent. It's an opportunity to lower costs and run a facility better because you're comparing yourself against what others are doing in your industry sector or in your geographic region. And so what this map here shows are states and cities across the United States that engage in different types of benchmarking and require different benchmarking. So the two most common colors here are orange and purple, where orange indicates benchmarking is required for public and commercial multifamily buildings, and purple indicates that benchmarking is required for those entities, but there are also additional actions required. And I'll focus in on Detroit and Ann Arbor, where these two cities require benchmarking. And so they're looking forward to potential water savings and efficiency in their cities and among industries in their cities. This also includes energy among these cities, and they're great examples if you were interested in looking up those resources. So looking towards the future, it's good to consider what industries are growing, what industries are shrinking, and how we can take advantage of Michigan's climate and the current technologies available when thinking about how to enhance those 2008 best management practices. So what cement, while it was a primary sector back in 2008 when the original BMPs were written, is a declining industry. So it's not somewhere where there's not as big of an opportunity to focus on water savings there. But snowmaking, data centers, and controlled environment agriculture are all growing. So there is an opportunity within these sectors to establish best management practices for water conservation early. Other opportunities include heat reuse and heat capture, where we now have the technologies to reuse water within a system and capture heat for alternative use within a facility. And lastly is taking advantage of Michigan's climate. Because Michigan has a seasonal climate, ambient air can be used to help cool and heat facilities, and rainfall can be captured in order to reuse on site. So those were a few examples of what next trends are and how companies are incorporating next trends. But I'm going to end with a review of the takeaway and opportunities that we learned from this project. So opportunity number one, you've heard me say it a few times. Those best management practices from 2008 are a very strong foundation to build off of. Takeaway two is that awareness of the voluntary 2008 best management practices and other resources is low among the B&I sector. This creates opportunity to share them out more. Three is advancement of innovation and integration in water use and efficiency, or WUE, differs among the B&I sectors. Corporate ESG goals and reducing operational costs are key drivers to action and engagement in those best management practices. Number 5, however, low costs of water and the perception of water abundance, in addition to competing priorities, are barriers to best management practice engagement. And then number 6, historical engagement and institutional memory plays a key role in determining water conservation BMP implementation. So based off of these takeaways, we can look forward to opportunities. The first one is education and outreach, where there's opportunity to share examples of success, provide information on the best management practices and sector-specific resources. The second is voluntary engagement models, where programs that include technical assistance, peer learning, training, or public recognition for companies that successfully employ water conservation BMPs can help advance them. The third example is incentive and value proposition, where engaging in water conservation can be framed as a financial or ESG opportunity, and financial incentives or recognition for companies can help those take on BMPs and engage in them. Number 4 is cross-sector integration. Currently, water efficiency, energy efficiency, and wastewater initiatives are all siloed, but there's an opportunity to join efficiency and wastewater reduction efforts across all of these 3 to improve best management practice engagement. 5 is benchmarking and data. We currently live in a data age, and there's opportunity to use the amount of information out there to improve water use and efficiency within a facility and increase transparency through benchmarking. And then lastly, there's an opportunity with emerging sectors to integrate water conservation within these emerging sectors early as they grow, rather than encouraging water conservation best management practices once they're established. So with that, I'll pause here and thank you all for joining us today and listening to our presentation, and invite any questions.
Thanks. Going back to earlier in your presentation, you were kind of going over the non-business and industry water use sectors and looking at their efficiency. You mentioned in particular kind of lack of resources and a lack of ability to access either program or a lack of programs to be able to both formalize a plan for efficiency as well as be able to implement it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm happy to. And I'm just going to repeat the question here just to make sure I heard you correctly, since there seemed like a little bit of echo in the room, asking about the non-BNI sector engagement, with one of the takeaways being a desire for an expansion of public resources and outreach programs to advance water use efficiency. And just to speak a little bit more to that, am I hearing the question correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So as I mentioned, this work was primarily led by our team at the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and we go into much more detail in the report. But just to expand on that a little bit, and I'm just navigating to my slide here shortly. A lot of the sectors just offered this as a recommendation to help broaden the education on this topic. One of the reflections from the overall project being that not everyone was aware of the 2008 BMPs, but this is likely already happening at these various organizations, and just being able to connect the dots with their already existing priorities. So some of the examples that came through, I'm looking here at my notes, for the public water sector, the ag irrigation and non-ag irrigation folks pointed to constructing landing pages for each sector with this information and resources that are tailored to each sector. Some of the folks in the ag space that the MIA team chatted with spoke to expanding farmer outreach programs to have more one-on-one conversations with growers and help introduce them to efficient technologies, demonstrating the impacts of effective irrigation and crop production. And as we heard from the earlier update, it sounds like that's already happening through an existing pilot. So that's wonderful to hear. Some of the golf courses that we're engaged with shared that conducting outreach to smaller scale golf courses would be really helpful. There's already a lot of momentum happening at the much larger nationwide level golf courses, but those small, more locally owned golf courses really need that extra help to educate them on innovations in irrigation. And this can also be applied to other non-ag sector organizations, just not just golf. And then some folks also pointed to voluntary water audits in the public water supply as being helpful, although there were some mixed feelings about that in the ag space. Does that help provide a little bit more nuance to that?
It does, and I guess as a follow-up to that question, is there any thought about some of the follow-up to help to provide those resources or to make that case an economic analysis that includes, for instance, energy costs and treatment costs and permitting costs and, and other things to demonstrate sort of a financial benefit to implementing water use efficiency programs that maybe stems outside of just strictly the water sector, but which kind of takes a look at the whole business model to say, hey, if you do these things, it's upfront cost now, but here's your return on investment. Here's the money you save down the road.
Yeah, I really think you hit it. You're right on point right there. What we went over in the presentation with water use efficiency being a co-benefit or being not maybe the issue that rises to the top. One of our recommendations that Devin went over at the end there is how can we connect those dots for folks and kind of show them how water use efficiency kind of fits into the already existing priorities and make that business case. I think for a lot of the stakeholders we talked with, not only in the non-BNI sectors, but in the BNI sectors, those cost reductions, as well as meeting those ESG goals that I spoke to are really two of the key motivators. So I think wherever the state has the opportunity to provide resources that show that cost effectiveness, I think that will be really effective.
Thanks.
I have a question for you. In the report, did you guys do any sort of evaluation or benchmark of pre-2008 or at 2008, these sectors kind of identified their own BMPs that they agreed with, and then comparing like the percentage of the businesses in each sector that were attaining those in 2008 compared to attaining them now, just where we could get a look at it. Obviously, there's a lot of obstacles, but has there been great progress, meaningful progress, very little progress because of some of these challenges?
Okay, yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. In terms of engagement, there's conversation that while BMPs were incorporated into facility operations, they were not necessarily intentionally followed from the state recommended BMPs, and I think that stood to be the case today. So we went over a bit in the report examples of how BMPs were potentially integrated, but they weren't. There was not necessarily forward improvement in terms of following those in a prescriptive method. And from a research from an innovation perspective, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of building off of what those foundational 2008 best management practices were, in the sense where these concepts of water reuse, these concepts of tracking water and ensuring, in cooling system cycles of concentration increasing, those were all recognized and established in 2008, but with new technologies, with advancing data, it's just enhancing those and improving the functionality of those best management practices.
The project wasn't intended to evaluate whether Michigan water sectors were implementing those voluntary BMPs. Yeah, they're voluntary BMPs, so there's no way to really evaluate that unless people in those industries are willing to share that information. So, and as the team said, people were more comfortable sharing information in those one-on-one conversations, but when we tried to hold stakeholder workshops, people were very thorough. So, that wasn't our intent to try to evaluate whether or not those things have been implemented, but instead to look at what are the kind of the motivations behind them, what things are they currently doing, and kind of more from an information out standpoint versus us trying to analyze their business operations for that state over the last 20 years. Because the motivations are, from the perspective, Lori, the place where I don't know if we have kind of data that shows, return assessment when things like revision retrofits. And do we put money in the economic analysis? Do we just put money in just I think that's part of the project, though, right? Because I think that those economic benefits and it is. And I know there was a lot of discussion at this meeting because people were like, why are you trying to generate energy and why do we need to know that? And this proves kind of what we were saying, like, there's a give and take to everything, right? So people aren't always gonna, like they said, make the efficiency and conservation their #1 priority because of cost. So they're always trying to balance, right? To find that balance so that they can continue to have a farm and a job and a business. That those things are on the radar, right? So there's a balance. And I think the more we can show and draw conclusions like, okay, if you do this a little bit more than you are now using this technology, this is where your savings is going to come. Makes those changes more palatable. So.
It was a great point. I mean, I've got friends that's their business of engineering electric efficiency and in buildings, and it sells itself. You can actually do the math and point people to that, this is the ROI, and that comes in 4 or 5 years, and then you're saving at that point. So if you're able to draw those straight lines that you're conserving water and money, it would seem like it would potentially sell itself to many.
I think for me, it's, my mind's on like 1 or 2 sectors where I think that gets complicated in that some of the takeaways are opportunities for education, voluntary, and doing this sort of making the case that if you invest upfront, it will pay them. And I think there's a few cases where that probably falls down, right? Like, and it was mentioned on the Microsoft example, the data center that they pay for a closed loop so they can use less. And you always hear me talk about kind of the direction of aquaculture. What happens though is that upfront capital cost and building that is so steep that if another operator just can get the groundwater and just use 4 million gallons a day once, it's the disincentive to try to do the right thing. And so for that, there's some situations for doing the right thing. We may not make a case that they're going to get the money back for a long time by doing it conservative, conservation-minded way. So I'm always, my take, but there's probably another role beyond just incentives and voluntary or some level of regulation to create that platform where doing the upfront cost is sort of doesn't get penalized by all your competitors not doing that thing. It's definitely not all sectors, but that's been on my mind for.
Yeah, definitely, and Kelly, I appreciate you bringing up kind of the work that you guys have done about talking about, you can't just talk about water use efficiency, you got to talk about energy efficiency and cost savings that way. And kind of in the back of my mind, like my dream of having, a good conservation program is to not only have some of the pilots where you're demonstrating that the technology works, hey, we retrofit this irrigation system and it works. But then also to go through and do that economic analysis, not only to help people understand where there is ROI, but also to identify, here's the sectors that are never going to get it. This is where if you need access to public resources, either for a specific period of time or forever, because they're never going to pay off, these are the ones to prioritize because everybody else is going to get that, that return. So you probably don't need to pay for it, or at least not for very long, but if you're gonna aim public resource, it's a public good, like conserving, everybody's shared water resource. This is the direction to go, because our analysis shows that this is never gonna pay off.
Well, I think the other piece too, we had this conversation yesterday, is just competitive advantage, disadvantage. So, who regulate certain types of water uses, or it's a high consumptive use, or be creating a disadvantage and a competitive situation. So I had a question for the team about,
Before we leave that though, I want to circle back because the SEC new rules and tracking carbon and stuff, like there are convergent things that are gonna play a role in this, right? So companies like Microsoft have something else they're trying to balance, right, with different carbon markets and the new SEC thing, rules that they have to follow. So there is a benefit to them implementing these things. It might not be economical upfront, but it is economical in a different way backwards.
Or is that co-benefit, like
Yeah,
we save
yeah.
this much energy, which lowers our carbon intensity score, and it also so happens to use less water, that kind of thing.
I think looking at it from not specifically economic, but there are balancing those benefits, right?
and I think some of that was in the long, the report is like 100 pages long, but there's a long and a short version. 109. And so anybody who wants to read the long report or the short report, we're welcome to, we're happy to share that. We're still picking up the comments and there's some things that we want to pull from the long report and the short version. So that some of these important points. But Frank, you had a question.
I was just going to talk about memories. There's things that we need to do, even if they don't make any sense. We need to do them because we need to save the earth. We need to save us. We need to save the environment. And there's something to be said for that. And there's ways to do that that are some things that we just try to just do it. Dollars and cents. And I mean, but on the other hand, if you make that investment, you're helping everybody, and you're helping future generations. And so you have to have long-term thinking on this. And that's where in agriculture, and really long-term thinking about the land. And that's been something that is, that long-term thinking on land crosses purpose with short-term putting up a factory on number one soil, because it's flat and it's easy to build a factory, whereas we need the soil to grow food. And so there's that tension there. And so just the economics of doing it, short-term economic gain versus long-term societal loss is something we have to consider all the time.
And I think that's where those public resources come in. Sorry to get you that question.
Maybe this has already been discussed by the council, but I don't know if this is a question for the water issues group or for everyone, but I'm hearing anecdotally real concerns about data centers showing up, looking into municipal water supplies, draining huge amounts of water for the cooling and dumping, and just taxing the ability of these water systems to supply water. I'm guessing they're also, it's all heat production, right? So could you be using the heat that they're generating to generate energy or something? That is the state starting to think seriously about this is a growing problem that we need to address and get in front of it instead of getting caught, Has that been a topic that we've been talking about?
A lot.
I'm sorry.
There's a lot of conversation around that. There's also a lot of existing capacity in the public water supply systems. Then, we were just having this conversation yesterday. How do you look at if there are data centers buying water, public water supply, they're rates are down compared to what residential customer might be paying. So there are a lot of complexities around that and a lot of actually controlling. Looking at infrastructure, what is the energy doing? How does that fit into our long-term?
And the idea of
Decarbonization goals.
yeah, the heat is a resource that's worth money. And what they're doing is basically water to get rid of the heat. So we're figuring out how we use the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Actually use that heat, the whole idea of the cooling is to keep it from actually heating up, right? Like, it's to prevent the heat.
Yeah. And Adam and I were actually talking about this exact topic, before the meeting started. You know, because one of the big concerns that farmers have, we're such a tiny part of the population, is whenever you start making lists of people who should be prohibited from using large amounts of water, farmers almost always end up on that list, because people don't understand what farmers do. And so we get real nervous when people start talking about, well, we should prevent these people, data centers, whoever the bad guy is today. Maybe it's a, you know, maybe it's a marijuana grower, maybe it's a beer producer, you know, whoever you don't like. We should prevent those people from being able to use water. And one thing that Adam brought up was he said, well, what if our focus, instead of telling specific industry sectors that they can't use water, is why don't we get, you know, more proactive about efficiency measures? You know, because that's something that everybody can get behind, rather than saying, we're gonna pick winners and losers out of who gets access to water resources. Instead, it is your, you know, everybody gets to use this resource, it's a shared resource, and you have to be put in efficiency measures to, you know, to demonstrate that you're making wise use of it.
Yeah, I understand, I don't engage in data centers in part of.
Yeah.
But I think maybe some restrictions on where they get cited. If they're generating heat that can be used as energy, you probably want to locate them in a place where you can capture that most effectively. We have a range of things. But I don't know. Yeah.
So there's UP at the elementary school that's causing sound issues.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of conversation happening at the regional level, compact conservation about too. So this is very much front and center of all the Great Lakes states and the provinces, and how we're thinking about compact and Great Lakes water use, and also in the state of Michigan. You know, how do we help make better siting decisions? How do we help inform better siting decisions so that we're supporting long-term sustainability of the resource, but also looking at where it's infrastructure, maximizing the opportunities that the energy can produce. So there are a lot of conversations, you know, we don't have it all figured out yet, but you know,
Can you figure that out?
got it.
This also deals with energy. So you've got, we're using water, but what the data centers are using a lot of energy. And a lot of them want to create. We just talked about the one at UP, because they got power up there, with small data center, but it's in a rural township, but there's still the scale is such that we're gonna, the question about energy that also has a problem, because energy is using water in the systems. So this water use is multiple faceted. And I think that it all interconnects in this different fashion. That was, you know, comment about how interconnected this is and why we've always focused on trying to be sure that we talk about both of them at the same time.
I think it's, and I want to be respectful to our AWE's time too. So I had a question for the team, I can kind of bring it back to the presentation and some of the, I think we keep going into the centers, I think the entire. And I think it would be good to bring some of the presentation to Compact House and Rich Line at the better meetings in June. There's some research being funded. Looking at there are a lot of different types of data centers that have different types of water use and energy use and trends and what's going where, what, you know, may be growing in terms of different types in the region. So I think there's good information research helping to inform a lot of policy and resource management decisions. But I just want to come back to AWE. You talked about Detroit and Ann Arbor having requirements for benchmarking. Can you just talk a little bit more about what those requirements are? Are those local ordinances and zoning? Are those requirements of water utility or residential water users to use water efficiently?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit. So both Ann Arbor and Detroit use a reporting platform called Energy Star, which is a large reporting platform for both water and energy, and is a national program available for reporting water use and providing a benchmarking. So when commercial buildings, public buildings, and multifamily buildings must report. Residential buildings do not have to report, or residential, accounts don't have to report. And when they provide their data to the system, they're able to be benchmarked on not only a national level, or not only a local level, but also a national level. So it's a benefit. Of course, that information is they're not pulled out, but they're combined into sector groups, right? And in terms of size and reporting, it does timing and when you have to report and how it was phased in depended on your size of your building, and so or your space, and so that there was a phase in process. And so if I will check my notes, but if I remember correctly, it's fully phased in at this point for both cities, and that reporting is required on an annual basis.
And is that information in the longer version of the report?
Both are linked to those are both linked to the sites. Yes, they're referenced. That the detailed information of the benchmark reporting is not in there, although that can be added if that is a piece of feedback that we receive. But the information to access the details on that reporting is in there, yes.
And then what are your thoughts on, data, we're talking about data centers, big tech, chip manufacturers, some of these water intensive industries that are growing. We don't currently have voluntary investment practices for those types of industries. I know AWE, I think AWE is working with some of those types of industries to help them develop water conservation practices. Can you just speak to any information that you have about that work and how you might, I guess, as a state, as a program, look for opportunities to work with those industries to create voluntary investment practices that they would then have to include in their applications or registrations or permits?
Yeah, well, as an organization, we're very interested in data center water use, and this is key area for us going forward. And we actually recently at our symposium had a session about data centers and water use to really continue this conversation amongst water practitioners from around the nation. It was really interesting and a lot of good conversation and steps forward. But the reality is there are a series of unknowns right now because these data centers are going up so quick. So there are a lot of research questions in this area that we're hoping to help answer. In terms of, implementing best management practices and thinking about when to do it, as I mentioned, it's key to do it at the beginning, right? To establish best management practices so that it's built into infrastructure and design. I know that not only are organizations like us thinking about this, but the companies themselves are thinking about their water use and efficiency because it's a resource that they have to use, and they realize that they need to pull water from, if it's not treated themselves, from a local, municipality or resource. And where data centers are located is very important to be climate dependent and water availability. And also, and I believe I heard it mentioned energy as well, right? So there are multiple components here. AWE is at the forefront of helping answer these questions, but a lot of the questions remain standing. And so I think that thinking about opportunities for reuse though, and making sure that water is used to its full capacity to cool within a system is really going to be the underlying key factor there.
Yeah. That's good.
No, that's okay.
I think a lot of elements, what Frank's saying about considering the earth and the conversations we've had around data centers and the potential that for water intensive industries that maybe there be a piece of policy that requires that those kind of conservation and efficiency measures on, hearing that it's important to do that early. And the other thing about Amanda and Devin's presentation that I thought was interesting is agriculture was the only one doing their EMPs on an annual basis, getting them into GAMPs. And the other intensive industries are largely, you're right, like well, we can get it for basically free, why not? And that just, this whole conversation just kind of pointing to the fact that that area of policy might need, should be explored and early, if anything,
Yeah, I agree. There's some protocols I just start contrast, right? Like we have this pilot program. We're gonna try to make sure a lot of users that might use 300,000 gallons a day for 20 days of the year when it's absolutely necessary to keep the crop alive. But you can have, after today's storm, some of the facilities I know and I've dealt with, whether they're aquaculture or new energy proposal, you're going to be using 3 or 4 times what we saw today, which is geared up for not only all of this, but future businesses up and down the road and sharing with the community. And to just like use that volume one time because it's cheap to not put in some of the other stuff. Well, smaller users or, use collection, I'm getting very sophisticated about drip irrigation and, everything. It's just, I think we probably still have some loopholes where sometimes doing the right thing might not really get you running up to the wall, but like having the action signs. Yeah, it's a little bit tough. I think we probably hit on a few subjects that.
I did want to note too, there are that are absolutely looking at heat not as a waste, but as an opportunity.
So I think our next steps as a committee are to take these findings and recommendations and I think moving towards creating recommendations that we'll be able to bring forward for the next 5 years of the board. This is going to be perfect timing. And creating, I think we need to create some kind of a water conservation strategy from given these high intensive water industries and a lot of other things that we're seeing happen. Farmland, time and floods. So I think there's a lot of really important questions, and I just want to say thank you to the Alliance for Water Efficiency for the really incredible work that you did in the deep dive. This was, I think, even more than we were anticipating in terms of learning on this project. And we're really excited about it. And it's also reinforcing things. Just the low-hanging fruit, creating a water conservation website that has tips and resources for different businesses and industries, as well as residential water users. And that education piece is really important. And, some other states in the Great Lakes region, they have full-time water conservation to work with businesses and industries. And so there are opportunities and things that we look to sharpen the point on this as an opportunity of long-term sustainability of our water resources.
I might have missed some of what you said, but thank you so much to you all for giving us the opportunity to work on this effort and contribute to the advancement of water conservation and efficiency across the state. If more questions come up as you continue these discussions, we are more than happy to help answer them and provide more resources and nuance. I'm sure there will be more once you get the chance to dig into the final report as well. But just to underscore, everything everyone already said, this is already happening across the state. It's just a matter of connecting those dots, building those bridges, and making sure that the solutions going forward have that buy-in and kind of sustained engagement with the various water use sectors. And with that, I know you all have a very packed agenda for the rest of your afternoon. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Anything else as the report you have your slides?
No, we're done with the slides, but as you can see, this has been a lot of discussion at the committee level, and this will generate some great discussion with the council. So.
Emily, as a follow-up, since you said you were working on recommendations, if there's anything from the ag sector or particularly from aquaculture, which is farming. As our aquaculture producers like to remind, they remind me frequently, it's farming. Hey, bees are farming too, apparently. If there's any help that we can provide, we need to bring in some of our, some of our agriculture producers. I know you talked to some of them already, but if there's any way that we can be helpful, please let me know.
I'll strategize with the two I mentioned that to the executive. But minor update that I caught in the news a couple of weeks ago is that Eagle was nice and kind for the last year or two. Occasionally give updates on the possible amount of emission go off for situation. That company appeared to have folded up completely and sold off like most of their stuff. But here to us, apparently this one Wisconsin company that by all accounts does very sustainable, and they're one of the few US companies that seem to thrive in doing ideal aquaculture conversion. They just bought it with plans to install closed loop and to do it there and like to do greeneries to try to do some fisheries. And I'm going to try to reach out and see if they might be willing, because they are one of the few, even though there's a lot of companies trying to do it cheaper to get market, they seem to be now expanding, but a lot of the even shortcut companies have been pulled up. So there's something there about their ability to do things a really ideal way and make it work economically. So I'm going to try to see if at some point they might be going to talk to us about their approach. I'll let you know.
Yeah, and there's something like the code on how to make recirculating aquaculture profitable. I'd love to hear it.
I would too. But I think some of the presentations that we had for the council meeting, in Chicago back in June on data centers. And there's so much information out there. It's just, it doesn't hurt to keep kind of in front of us to figure out things about energy. So, I'll look at the now and check and see. I just think it's opportunity for all this. There's some really good things that are happening. Very helpful.
You said that the Compact Council was working on this a lot. Is there, are they coming up with anything that would, are they coming up with any ideas? Or are they kind of doing what we're doing, where we're saying, yeah, this is a problem, we're not sure how to fix it?
The science strategy, and the science team, we're looking at future water needs, water demand. So looking at opportunities for those regional studies that can help better pull all the existing data and information together. The Joyce Foundation has been funding University of Virginia to look at different data centers in the region and what the trends are and the trends are nationally. So there's a couple presentations that have been at the council meetings of those activities. So they're funded by the foundations. I think that would be really interested in helping to support some of this research to help make sure that the company is strong and that we're saving energy water meters, that we're thinking about climate impacts and other trends of what future might look like water use within the region. So I'll go back and look at the agenda. All those presentations were recorded, so we can share them, but we can also invite those speakers here so that we can have some discussion.
I think maybe cross-pollinating, I don't know where Senator Bear's work group on that ended up, but I know we're.
No, I was never invited to that.
You didn't miss anything?
I was gonna mention,
Guy you need, it's not me.
I could follow up with you later, Senator Baylor did. I think she's from your neck of the woods, so I could talk to you after the meeting if you're interested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When she was finishing up.
Eagle Horse. She's on the east side. She's on my side.
Item of note, Eagle just received regional notice under the compact. State of New York issued a regional public notice under the compact that's required if you have a newer increased large quantity withdrawal over 5 MGD consumptive use. So the state of New York has one for withdrawal from Lake Ontario for increased withdrawal over 5 MGD public use for consumptive use. That's for a combination of public water supply, but also part of it is going to a data center. So we just received that. I think the public notice deadline is in October. So after the October council meeting.
So it's increased to it. So there's a request for, it's a public notice and subject to conditional notification. You can pay large quantity from increase or new increase from that has more than 5 million gallons in some use per day on average. And so we just like about a week ago, just got an application from New York for this proposal and comment. I don't know exactly, it's like on October 27th, that's not bad. I guess October 27th. So we'll be looking at that. It's not subject to regional review, but it's subject to regional.
Public comment, well, reading why or is it just?
It's subject to regional notice, so notification to the parties to the compact. I don't know that I would assume that anyone can provide comment in the state of New York in their public notice process. That's not restricted.
I'm probably gonna get some calls.
Saying this, we have equal opportunity to review the application against the compact criteria. Okay. And submit comments. We feel that the comments on the application have been through these other ones. So there is no sort of waiting process.
Appreciate that. And I think that's good. So to kind of wrap in some of our conservation stuff, I actually don't think, I mentioned aquaculture, certain types of aquaculture, I mentioned data centers, there's a lot of those types. But you mentioned semiconductor, and one of the issues of the issue right now that is something of a high volume data is cooling for electricity. So it's maybe not any one of those. It's some of these very high usage where it's maybe not implicit to consume that much. It's sort of an election about like how much you spend and how you set up your reuse of it. And I think that's the commonality I see. High use and there's potential for reuse that comes with the capital cost.
And I think that's a really relevant point, something I don't think the discussion with council as well as our community is, we don't have a lot of use strategies today, we don't have a lot of use policy. That is something that we're starting to talk about at the council level. Bruno Pickett, who is with the state of Indiana, doing some work with Lakes Commissioners. He is now the head of the National Water Reuse Association, so they're looking forward to working with him and the Great Lakes Commission, where I also sit on the commission with head of the Delegation State Michigan. Water use, water focus, those kinds of things. So regionally, this is definitely a topic that is right in the center of a lot of those discussions.
Thanks for bringing all this forward. Obviously, it's a good subject. So I get to turn to the mundane. Not that interesting. Important, yeah. So the data collection or the data committee update is pretty simple. We had a meeting. We kind of did a pretty comprehensive round robin about like all the projects. Actually, maybe overlapping stuff on the implementation committees, but it was pretty good, pretty useful. I think what's coming out of it is the focus areas for the data committee to hone in on and really own. So clearly there's stuff that you guys are doing, there's stuff that models committee is doing that could fall in that bucket. But I think the short list of what the data committee will have front and center will follow engagement into the data planning project. setting up and structuring and getting the Lakes Carolina project going. Involvement in participation with the two different downstream accounting-based projects. The long-term work that's always been there, and also discussions about data collection use protocols for a couple different types of data. And then looking ahead, a certain number of months, we'll get back to the 3-year data from the DNR. And I want to make sure that, you know, thoughtful and respectful of people's authorities. At this point, it seems to be the DNR's authority on defining what is convincing enough to reclassify stream in statute. It basically said, if you convince the NRC, the Natural Resource Commission, that's been determined. I'm not aware to say whether actually not determined that that was shifted to the DNR during past executive order. But we never really had any, I don't follow it exactly, but we've been told it several times. But in statute, we never defined what burden of proof it would take to reclassify a stream versus how they were originally classified. And so I think that's very much what's going to be under the surface of that. And we spent, as committee, like a couple years ago, 3 years ago now, we spent quite a number of hours going through what we wanted, what everybody wanted to see the DNR collect. That's not necessarily that we were setting like a protocol or standards. It was just for this situation right now, we'd like to go maybe a little bit more aggressive than necessary to learn from it. And so I do see that when that data becomes available, we really need to all review it, learn from the data, like, you know, you all have to be prepared for their time. So need them every 2 or 3 miles. We're gonna have to learn from it. The DNR, I want to make sure everything's right. So the DNR has full authority to make their own decision on what instances have to be classified as what's their authority. But in a statute, we get to make recommendations for them. So if we all review it, as water council, that there are recommendations as to that process for free things, whether they'll be adopted. You know, keep expectations low, right? It's director's authority, it's their authority. We can recommend something, but I see that on our plate. I'm not sure when we're going to get that all ready to be shared, but I know that's coming as well. And so we'll have to do that. It's inherently data things I can't talk about to the policy. So we'll share that as well. I just don't know the time. That collection seems to be the pretty tight list of things that are distinctly on committee's question.
Okay. We know that we're using data. The thing that concerns me is the current trend to get rid of data. In other words, how should we be concerned about that? Not only is the decision based on science, but that the material, the data that we need to make those decisions is somehow preserved. Are there any, what kind of things do we need to be concerned about? Tribes, a lot of the data that we rely on, we weren't housing ourselves. And so some of it has gone away. We've only had a chance to actually deal with what before we can pack it up. And so I'm just concerned that we may be making all these decisions about how data should be used. But we need to somehow make sure that that data is still available to make those decisions. And I don't know, we don't have a lot of control over that. But I think we ought to at least pay attention to where this is being housed and under what laws it's being created. And how we can help preserve that ability to do our jobs.
Great point. It's a very real thing, and I think we'll probably be able to grapple with that more with the water database projects to some degree. So an example of this, right? DNR didn't have to but they chose to contract and pay a consulting firm to do a bunch of data collection. It'll come into them and the client. DNR owns that data, it'll have to house that data. But at some point, right, if the decision in the water system is made based on that, they have to have those discussions about where do we keep that data, who gets it, and I know that there's a very live discussion about the sort of water database and when you link to something, when do you hold it, what's the cost of holding everything, having Google access and all that, so.
When political decisions are based on, when somebody is like, national data was put on. I'm just concerned, and they did express it.
To add, I guess my comment was, I mean, that's an exercise that's gonna take citizens. So I think we've got 2 research reports we've heard from them where they talk a lot about building trust within the system, right? So data can be manipulated, right? And so having trust in the system, so people are like, now I know there's a protocol for how data will be used. How will it be analyzed? How will it be housed? And where and that kind of stuff. I think helps to bring more stakeholders to the table and opens up that transparency and hopefully will build trust.
And one nice little point is, within the tribal communities across the country, data sovereignty is a big issue. We need to own our own data for governance, because we can't rely that where it's housed will be available to us. And so, and not only that stuff about us, we should have to say it. And so I think that same general philosophy is brought to a broader scale. I don't think it can. It's just, it's always there. And that's not necessarily true.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Brian, that it's quite frightening. What we're seeing with federal data could very easily happen in state data. Because of what. And it's very real. Is there a procedure or what's the criteria that's in place for this new classification and data that we need to support changing the classification?
No, so that's what it's paragraph.
Should that be in statute? Right now, it's factual, things, decision making. And it cannot be the interpretation of delegated authority to agency.
That may be a path that the water council chooses to pursue as we dive into this, right? It may be a recommendation everybody finds that it needs compliance to be in governance with statute, or it could be a recommendation to the director that just kind of still very down a few times. It wasn't included in statute, but there was a lot of it. Like, so the quick history lesson that I researched, kind of we're told compact needs to go down. Michigan's trying to complete theirs. A lot of states, but he didn't go after to figure out the details. We figured out a lot of the details. We were told throughout the time. Like, and so.
Otherwise.
And there was no first thing. And so to not get too big, but like part of the fallback systems that were put in place were little quick checks like, hey, NRC will approve it. There was discussion around that because why the DNR, if people overseas it, was that was the only agency that had a public open body where people didn't notice that go on comment. So it chose that hurry because it seemed like the most equitable and open disclosure venue to address that. But it just said that NRC but the Water Council was in the statute across all of those short things that we ran out of time on because everybody knew that did really think and work through every conceivable scenario of the program. So it's envisioned that this council sticks around to continuously address those to find the gaps, fill them. It just happened, not to do too long history of the discoveries after like a year or something. We're back. It will be our decision of whether you kind of want to recommend statutory change or just put a recommendation out to the director. That's this. It's our privilege to make a recommendation which happens. But no, what we have now is captured the initial discussions about just this data exploration project, which 3 years of we are undertook. We have notes on that, obviously the scope of work that reflected this, but there is no protocol standards for what would take. It's really, if you, we didn't say it this way, but if you could consider see that you had data that was more powerful than the original prediction was based on, you probably could get better and see. But now it's the direction of progress. So that changes. Right, and technically, again, you know, not aware. Saw it. Years ago, longer than the NRC process and advertised, put it up for notice. But when something goes to the director, they are not obligated to follow the NRC's notice process. They did because it was the right move to not sneak it through, but they're not obligated to do that. Personally, I felt like the NRC was really the right vehicle to disclose and notice things for several months and not have it just sort of quietly done. That's maybe another recommendation in the future, but we've been told a couple times that it's in there. I don't actually know how things have been that change statute.
A lot of statute is very restrictive, yes, it was written down, and that's very intentional. Things that weren't, I think we need to be careful about saying, oh, we should want a statute. I think we need to very carefully study it, what we like the data as representing all the decisions that we do. If we have an agreement, that sets the line, why. If it really does make sense that it should be a statute, then we figure out a way to do that. That would not be the because put it in statute, and what's that mean? You don't listen to out. And it really just makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think our director or commission will listen to us because of the
But I think we need, and I'm not so kind of statute, but I think we need consistency. We need agreement, consensus around the process. That way we've got consistency and a record of decision. So that is.
And I'll say we should have done this proactively all the time, right? But nature of humans, we didn't have a real case. So saying like, hey, we should really talk through hypothetically reclassifying, so we didn't. And shame on me too, because we've actually had a few streams where we do have it here, and we think they should be reclassified. I never even looked at protocol once either, and I just been shot one past the car. Now we find ourselves in one that's very real ramifications. So it kind of elevates it. We should have, I'd say, proactively addressed it as a theoretical, not struck no time. We will. I think one that even gets closer is the right. We've never really done that's something we need to example. Now we can do that. It's that the model is I mentioned. That's the tell bring up the full council, but that is very that's the problem. Oh, that's more than times. And your point, I think it's not science, it's here, it's the data. It's the bills of science. And yes, something about it is. I always it is scary the idea of data. I can't really buy it. And more accessible is not. And we want more data, more accessible.
They don't make this as decisions. So we're talking about models, but models based on. Yes, I mean, there's nothing. But then, so anyway, models. So we have a number of projects that are kind of along the wall. And I'm not gonna have this one go with these files and then this. I thought it's periodically would bring us people working on each of which project can kind of give a more detailed update. So I'm thinking targets from my artists and she'll have much fun. I'm thinking maybe December would be the time to bring that back in again, see what we did a few months ago. Just trying to get a good update there. There's other ones that are much smaller projects that we'll be bringing them before then. That as we get to the point that it looks like this again. And some will just kind of absorb into the models committee. Where I think we need to have some recommendations. And then we'll do the recommendations and models going to bring that to the council. Next number of months, as some of these things started getting being done or supposed to be done. A lot of things, David, like, interpreters and modeling techniques, a lot of different things throughout the in the mix that people talk about. One thing I did want to talk about is because at the end of the last meeting, we got the second comment. At least there was a consultant because I don't know how it's on me, why not?
I believe you.
Yeah, Todd is online.
So, I was a consultant, works on a number of different projects, sort of the department on a regular basis, so a number of farmers. He had submitted a mod that they created 3 years ago. So he kind of was making the comment, hey, it's 3 years, find the comments, you take on it. The department took disagreed with some things I did. They kind of redid the model in a way that I don't even recognize now. And he said, I think there are communication problems and a number of things. So it's kind of putting all of that out there. And he's trying to make, wants to. From the board department, New York, how do we, the council, it's kind of, and the council asked the models committee, can you dig into this a little bit and see what it can come up with? So we did that in the sense that we wanted to focus on the process and we decided to treat it as a case study. We didn't really want to kind of relitigate this thing in some sense. But we wanted to understand what was going on, how decisions were made. So we ended up having each side at the time, the department, make a presentation. And for a lot of people, this can help us on more importantly. Why was it so? So the very good meeting, a very long meeting in the sense that the presentations go out longer than what we could do. But we raised the high things, we had to call time after a while, because there's a lot of questions. And it was kind of the will of the committee was, we want to address these questions in my emails. We have scheduled a meeting, which is going to be September 8th at 3 o'clock. It's the Monday. Those the next meeting, we will I kind of want to get a sense of where we're at with that. So, a couple of main things really was, if you're concerned about time, and do agreement for everybody to that's really not, that's way too long. I think it was agreement with everyone. I can see that. So hopefully that goes away as an issue. There was agreement that communication could be improved, and not everybody recognized that. And I think there's our school buses people out of that. But there were still many disagreements on technical issues, and that's kind of a more difficult thing. How do you best do that? And so I asked Todd to pull together some of these plans, and that went through. I was hoping for a little more synthesis questions. So we've got a wide range of questions. What I found was kind of synthesizing something that I did. Continue to talk through a little more as maybe. And give people a sense of what was things why was it there? What is precise data that to go on? Why do you something like that? And I don't think it's going to be that we're going to make a determination that yes, the science says this, but it's going to be more to give people a feel for what we're saying. Understand the reasons. And so that's what we're going to do. I intend to kind of synthesize the questions, try to get it down to a more manageable, how do you work through this in a logical manner to surface whatever the issues are. And try to get to understand this, what was done, didn't really variety and should done, and really right. And it's understanding. It's a little bit different than what we've done before, but I think there's some value that come out of it. And I don't want to interfere in service, so we're fighting to put it back. So anyway, that was raised at the last meeting, so I'm giving you my biggest story. Yeah. Any questions on that or any of the projects?
I just want to say thank you for doing that. I thought it was well done. Thanks.
Just like a question with those of you here, I probably can't get online. What's everybody's working familiar models? Yeah, I'm sure as a general graph. Well, it occurs to me that this is very logical to me. Having, I don't do modeling, I don't program that, but I took modeling in college, and it's very natural to have a set of data, try to construct models that you can create. And it's very normal that the research groups have 25 different models. And then there's lots of methods that you select one that they want to use. But I thought I would mention like there's data, then models are how you use it, and there's like equally valid decisions about how you can model something. And so the fact that there would be disagreements over how the components of a model seem to be logical. How to resolve those, like more complicated, but like the fact that there's disagreements about the components of models.
Yeah, I agree that part's not unusual. But I think we've got a really good opportunity to say, how do people work with communication plans for everybody involved that help us to get that information back and forth, more efficiently and sooner and in a way that each side can, know what the concerns are and be able to answer concerns, so that it's a process that everybody comes to at the end. They may not love it, but they can live with it.
I know it works. There was a non-scientist for the International Open Rate Study. And I tell her that what our job was is to look at the scientists will get them, say what?
Yeah, if you can't say what you do to a fifth grader, then you don't actually know.
They were really proud of this thing. They look like modern art. So any more of these straight lines in the stack, and so you got to figure out how do you translate that to what people will be able to grasp. But I think the question for the good.
I think it's really great work beyond just looking back and trying to improve just like a one review, because you're setting up a Michigan hydrologic framework where we basically have a database of models. And through time, I don't know if it's going to take 5, 10, or 15 years, but there's going to be more and more people coming in and that's invest in some data collection and say, here's our model. And from a regulatory
part, 10 minutes, but they're doing things kind of fun.
this very nature.
Then
we do a lot of overview outside of this program, right? And I mean, really, it's not necessarily our perspective to try to stand up on them on to their legal. Really, it's almost like the proof of a negative, right? Like, so we try to disprove the model, and if we can't, then we say, given the available information we have this time, it's an effective model, and we leave it for decisions. Right, which kind of leaves the door open for additional information to be submitted and reviewed and incorporated, as opposed to saying this is the one single solution that possibly exists, because what we were getting at is essentially a model ideologies that are all non-unique solutions, right? Like, which means that they all solve the same problem, but they're all choose to get better data.
Anyways, to get to X, is it logical, does it work? Does the data support?
Done with more implementation, right?
We have not met recently, but I think we should probably get some of the books prior to our next meeting, just maybe obviously listening to updates, everyone's doing a lot of stuff, so it should be a fruitful meeting.
One of the things we've been working on is the budget, which is.
That's the thing, that's the thing, my goodness. Determine next year's.
Yeah.
And so that's where we missed this year. I don't know where we're at. I don't think anybody knows what next year's budget looks like. I mean,
We'll find out in September.
big industries.
Well, let's actually, if you're okay, let's go ahead. I'm gonna give this to you, but we're on the legislative update sharing, so you.
Yeah.
Good segue.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So we hear it on the radio, there is no budget. Nobody knows when there is a budget.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
It's not much of an update. Legislators to encourage sponsorship of our recommendation, which is now going to be required for budget additions. Because our recommendation under Eagle's budget was counted as earmarked, so they've got to identify a legislative sponsor and the new process that they use for their budget reconciliation. And so we've been working on that, working on getting a hearing. You know, the complication with how long it's taking to get the budget done has been slowing this whole process down, but it's definitely got legislators who are interested, you know, and they agree. This is a good use of money and not a problem, so.
Care to add?
Yeah, it's not a lot of money compared to the budget, but you know, now you got another $1 billion from the feds that are gonna affect a lot of programs, so. And Matt Hall wants to do this till the last half of the last day possible, and then we're gonna see what happens. So there's not a lot of cooperation, coordination, and it's unfortunately strategic. We're doing so well there for a long time, getting it out on time for all the schools and everybody doing stuff. And
Well, thanks.
Wishing you more.
Thanks, everybody, for keeping up on that. Eventually figure it out. All right. Anything else? Anybody else on that topic? All right.
Good.
Moving on to the Eagle.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is the program update for Eagles Water Use Program. So last month was the end of the annual program year, so I'll cover the July to July annual metrics for total SSR registrations, SSR timeliness, permits, pre-screening reviews. Lena's going to talk about some new groundwater projects, Aquifer pump test guidance document. Then Megan and/or Hannah are going to provide updates on the updates to the water withdrawal assessment tool and the stream flow depletion tools. And then finally, I'll end with some personnel notes from GRMD. So, as some of you are aware, the program year runs from July 9th of the previous year to July 8th of this year. So this is metrics for program year 16, total of 214 registrations through the water withdrawal assessment tool, another 131 SSR registrations. 37 RSSRs were beyond the 10-day deadline. We had 0 voluntary SSR requests, consequently 0 of them were late. This pie chart for the SSR status. I already covered the numbers, so. So 113 SSRs were authorized. Of the requests that we got, 113 were authorized. We had 1 denial. 13 were retracted by the applicant, and then 4 were still pending as of July 8th, 2025. Sorry.
The 214 is an addition to that.
Isn't
The 214 is in addition.
Yeah. Our timeliness. So the average number of business days from receipt of the request to completion, 11 days. 63% of the SSRs were done within the 10 business days. These graphs, the top shows the long-term trends since the beginning of the program in 2009 through current for the average number of business days to complete an SSR request. And the bottom graph is the percent of SSRs that are completed within that 10 business days. So in that program year, we had 9 requests for Part 327 permits. 8 were issued, 1 is under review. 64 compliance communications, which break down to 43 revised registrations, meaning that the withdrawal was authorized. The as-built as constructed details were different than what were authorized. So, but there was enough stream flow to authorize revised registration for the as-built as operated. Another 2 after the fact registrations for previously unregistered withdrawals. And then also we sent out 19 installation verifications where we contact the property owner to find out, did you install this withdrawal or not? In addition, the pre-screening reviews that we do in support of drinking water division. So essentially doing an SSR for a newer increased public water supply withdrawal, in addition to whatever else drinking water does under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Total of 22, 10 Zone A, 5 Zone B, 2 Zone C, 2 end up being Zone D recommendations back to drinking water. 2 are we felt could be authorized as a geology pass, meaning that the pump aquifer is not in communication. And then 1 authorized as replacement of existing baseline capacity. Okay, Lena, this is one of your slides.
Sarah is kindly helping develop some more from.
Somebody could mute their.
Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you.
Just gonna stay quiet until that's resolved. Yeah, I'm not sure why the slide is black all of a sudden, but yeah, we're going with the new thing. Yeah. Anyway, the Western Michigan Water Resource Study is a regional evaluation of the available water resources and use, and then also forecasting. It's actually kind of a duplication of some of the work that has been done out of Ohio that we were exposed to during the Compact Council. And it's essentially a way to integrate the available research that's already been done over there. There's been quite a few studies already done, a lot of data that's been collected. And really what we're going to do is use that and make it available for long-term. The next study is a hydrogen sulfide study out of New York County. And Sarah, would you mind? I feel like you're maybe a little bit more if it's on the spot.
Yes, that's us, it's MGS.
Yes, I know.
So there's an issue with generation of hydrogen sulfide in the groundwater down in Monroe County in select areas. And it's around some of the quarries, so there's been, some concerns of quarries and things, but there's also some geologic conditions that would be favorable. So right now, the health department in the county has areas that are exclusion zones. They can't put in, they prohibit water lines being installed, and people have to have cold water. And this has been a concern for quite some time, and so we proposed that we get to the bottom of this and do some research on this and find out, well, what's going on, what's contributing to the generation of solar, and what's the public health track. So that's what we are proposing to do. We have a lot core at the survey from this area, as well as there's plenty of water well data. The outer areas that the prohibition areas, and so we wanted to do some research there. We did some research on the same time this summer for the US projects, and that is a concern because there is additional uses in the future, licenses or something else. It would be important and valuable to know what's going on in this geological study.
Sarah, can you talk a little bit about kind of the status of that research project? Because Emily, because Kelly and I were exchanging glances when you started talking about the research, because we just proposed a research project from the irrigation dam committee to look at exactly this topic and what potential, less about the geology and more about what's the scope of the challenge and what mitigations, should we be thinking about and considering. And so I'm just wondering about, so that you're not fighting for $30,
No, the idea is being hatched.
Okay.
So we are. Yeah, so we've already got the fund squared.
Maybe this is.
Applying for funding that? or-
Well, we're recommending that MDARD either seek or provide funding for this research because it basically came from MDARD. They said, hey, irrigation dam committee, you get all these complaints, we don't know, quite the scope of public health risk, but, since there's concern that some of that exposure might come from running irrigation water from these high sulfur aquifers, we want the irrigation dam committee to come up with recommendations, and we looked at it and we said, we really can't, because there's not, like, all of the existing practices that you use to mitigate odors are not really designed for this. So we need research to understand, okay, how that is the problem, number one, and then, number two, what is an effective mitigation for it? So, because there's a lot of unknowns in this. And, I know that Health and Human Services, they've got a job, they've got to figure out how to inform the public, but it feels like they're maybe not getting quite as helpful in this case, because yesterday they sent out a letter saying that farmers are causing, hydrogen sulfide problems in the water in Dundee Township, and, yeah.
Sulfide, saying that the use of it.
It's exacerbating the issue.
Right.
So that wasn't exactly the gist of that. But there's probably opportunities to work together. One is the application, the anodization, sensitive and evening, yada, yada. But the other thing is general poor water quality in Monroe County. I mean, cars.
Everybody who lives down there, they've known about that for a long time.
Right.
Right. So I guess to that end, how can we work together? How can we help each other? How can we? What do you think we need so right now?
We could add to our scope, yeah. And I think adding needs to coordinate, like that, aligning, I guess a little bit, and then
that talks about this.
Hey, that's okay. Well, we presented our work problem, now we can come up with a solution.
Yeah.
Well, I'm super happy that it's the farmers. We have had a lot of meetings with with our NPDES permits and trying to fix certain limits. And the way that we treat it is hydrogen peroxide. We're trying to get those limits down before we discharge. However, there is no, for our millions of gallons a day that get discharged, there is no economical way to treat that volume of water to get it down. So we have had numerous meetings with Eagle on this issue, in trying to, I think some of our NPD gas permits now are against some thresholds that were not, like one, I've had a member say we just aren't gonna be able to meet them. And so we're probably gonna have to come up with some type of variance.
Are you guys,
So
are you guys having to get permits for the hydrogen peroxide that you're using?
it's all part of our NPD.
It's
We have to treat it. We have to
Yeah,
treat it.
okay.
So I've dealt with hydrogen peroxide permitting
Yeah.
and I've also dealt with vapor intrusion on the hydrogen sulfide, the proud manager of a landfill plume. So if you ever want to get into the weeds on that, we've just been through that with hydrogen sulfide, trying to deal with kind of figuring that out. So anyway, but it sounds like we need to connect some dots and that you guys can do that. Is there anything else that we want to talk about on this topic before we go on to the next part?
So I would just say the notifications that went out yesterday. Yeah, because you're a lot more about it.
We've been working with the HHS and MDR for probably a month on these complaints this year. The odor complaints are particularly bad.
Okay.
More elevated, and EHHS is kind of driving us a bit.
It's scary stuff. I mean, it's lethal at certain concentrations and we deal with it in the sewer system and it's nothing to mess around.
You know, the first bullet item, the water resource study, and what we were talking about yesterday. It's similar to the water forecast, water demand study that the water conservation efficiency committee put forward to the full council last year is a potential study that we kind of had on hold because there are a lot of Great Lakes philanthropy that were interested in supporting a larger regional study at the Great Lakes basin level. So it has become a very complicated thing to try to figure out what is moving forward at the nation funded study. Regional study versus pieces that we want to make sure we get. So I think I'm working concert, right? Like, and maybe something that I was saying yesterday that this is potentially going to go into a little bit more granularity. You know, it just off of the available work that's already been done, they'll be able to kind of start at almost at the midpoint, the halfway point, and be able to kind of integrate some of that and just move forward. And if it's something that the other group regionally wants to then extrapolate out, we've been talking about what that would look like. And I think that's, so the Great Lakes Basin wide scale, it would not be gathering new data. It would be compiling all of the existing data and models that are in place to look at static groundwater levels, water use, water demand, where we're seeing water intensive industries start to site, changes in agriculture. So Great Lakes Commission also has got a $200,000 grant from the Joyce Foundation to look at agricultural uses and levels and trends, and now that's changing. So I'm trying to figure out all these pieces. and make sure that they're all coordinated. We're not duplicating efforts, so, and then keep our committee up to speed and figure out how we can potentially, if there's funding needed from something, that we should really protect the funds, so. Yes, there are all of a sudden, there were all these kids playing the same sandbox, you want to do the same thing. Yeah. It's an exciting problem to have, and the reason that we want to fund it, but also, and we want to make sure that this states. Remember, that we're getting what we need to help manage and kind of work at the edge of the brushes that we have, so. I don't want that, and I don't think that other states are, we want to make sure that we inform one of these regional studies that the council should support with this foundation money. And it's our needs, not necessarily just what philanthropy wants to have.
How large an area is?
And that was exactly gonna be my question.
So the ones around, Ottawa, Alabama are kind of bullseye and then just well known, so Muskegon, Canterbury, Kalamazoo, Vancouver. So Southwest, Southwest.
Does it also tie into like the Michigan, Ohio border, those boundary?
No, we're closer to Indiana. I did not incorporate Vancouver and Kansas or St. Joe.
It also some of the other work that you.
Yeah, it's
funding.
not
Actually, after like that.
The modeling effort and the work of the many project, actually extract, sent out. Okay. So that come here and stay.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last one that we're working on is a contract with the Clear Group out of Wayne State, where they've developed a natural language processing program, an AI program that can actually be fed environmental data, right? So right now it's boring logs and analytic reports, but I'm hoping to have them train the program actually on site maps so that we can start having a better three-dimensional, like it can be all those black, essentially images according to the computer will then become machine available, machine readable, right? And so essentially this is kind of a pilot of that work that they're doing, and we're going to see how well we're able to integrate with the work that's already done. And then continue to support, if it's successful, additional work in the future for basically Eagle records to become available digitally.
Yeah, that's part of the whole idea of doing a backline on one line, the big run of data management. That's was talking with them, because what Clear is doing is they're doing a study down in Detroit. Remediation and development divisions documents and pulling that up, and they're looking at VOCs and relationships with different mortalities, so kind of what is involved in that. And I thought that was really fantastic.
So we're gonna be more interested in seeing how we can harvest and make use of the properties and mythology.
Yeah, I think that'll be really great. We did some work with EPA Region 5, looking at the EPA databases on brownfields for unsensible stuff. Once you get into a certain level, then it's all just PDF reports.
Yeah.
And so we told them, we could do so much, but then you gotta hire like a bazillion undergrads to try to digitize all this. But now, that's it, right? That's the their boa is, let the AI go and pull out what the actor interested in, whatever data they are from the whole PDF reports. So,
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Some of the initial presentations that they've been shared, they've created a raster data set for that type of environmental health data that they were interested in looking at under their NIH. There we go. Yeah. And I think it actually is really informative on the city scale, right? And the city of Detroit actually has a lot of mass inside of it. And so, it's got enough granularity to where you can see specific neighborhoods and the exposure risk for those neighborhoods. So it'll be good.
This sounds similar to some work that's going on. It's just written a report in May about work going on, tracking health data and groundwater concentrations of nitrates, since they've got some pretty bad problems out there.
We talked about it 1,000 years ago, and everything was called environmental monitoring committee. Good job, message. And we talked about that whole thing, just like the amount of geologic data that might be buried. Reports.
Right.
Kind of duplicating it fresh, but
Right.
there's a massive problem with how the tech get it usable. So it's really good progress. And then Lena shared something that the DNR apparently did with lake data. So they took a crowdsource approach where some service, like the all over the globe, would take all reports and just work on digitizing them and out data. They completed like all of the reports from that.
And everything was an over COVID lobby for a whole bunch of people, and they just did it for fun, I guess. This is a board of issues, but I know. So, that's pretty interesting.
What's possible now?
You didn't like ice fishing, but I do something with it.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. And then I think this is my last slide, Jim? It looks like you've moved ahead. I think maybe Jill, if she's on, was gonna hop on. Jill, I apologize, I didn't have time to switch out your slide.
Yeah, no problem. It's like what we talked about. There was kind of a need to have a more comprehensive APT guidance, you know. And so what we did is started with the guidance that was created for the water use assessment program, and then tried to expand that. And we, you know, put out feelers, asked for comments to see which programs wanted to be included and how we could do that. And like the slide says here, we're currently reviewing the drinking water comments and what they would like to see in it. So we're incorporating that a little bit more into this updated aquifer test guidance. So that's kind of where we are right now.
So a quick question about that, because I know that there's been a work crew that Dave has been helping to.
And I'm sorry if there's any questions. I really can't hear most of you talking. You sound like you're all talking Chinese. So, you know, yeah, I'm not sure if you asked me something, you know. But
There was a work group that was working on comments for the APT guidance document that was connected to the Water Use Advisory Council. And I just wanted to check on, are those comments also being incorporated into this draft? Because what you said sounded like it was comments from other offices and divisions in Eagle.
well, no, yeah, like we said, it's an update of that, and I was in on a lot of those work groups for the first one, and there was a lot of back and forth with what wanted, you know, should have been in, should have been out. But we did end up with our realistic guidance, and that's been used for quite some time now. But it needed to be updated and expanded. So yes, we incorporated the comments. I mean, it was based on all of those work committees that were attended. So that's in there. It's not starting from scratch. It's using that, but it's also considering the needs of some of these other groups, and that we need to have a basic, general guidance document.
Okay. Yeah, just to kind of summarize what Jill shared, we did, but that's where we started, like, we incorporated all the comments that one of the work group. And then from there, Jill kind of took another pass at it, and then we shared it with drinking water, just to kind of have them participate in the guidance document. And then we're hoping to share it back with the work group.
Good. I'll turn it over to Hannah to give us an update on the updates to the tool and the streamflow depletion tools.
Last time we talked to you guys, we indicated that we're gonna go in 2 releases. So the first release will just be Hunt 99 by Aquifer. That release date is September 22nd. So mark your calendars, it's gonna be great. The second release is kind of like for the end of the year. It's roughly like first or second week of December. So get ready for a great Christmas. This is the draft kind of home screen. It really hasn't changed much since you guys have seen it last. We did go with the fun decision of using pictures we should not feel. So that's very great. Okay. This is the registration management page. I think it's changed a little bit since you guys have seen it. But same thing you guys could do before, register, withdraw, modify registration, or cancel registration, whatever button or route you guys are planning on doing. Go ahead and click. If you're gonna register a new withdrawal, this is the map screen. The thing you're gonna talk about, which we've seen here before. Nothing really too much has changed on the map screen. You'll be able to select your location by a lat long or by address. When you go to the withdrawal at the top, you're going to change and you'll be able to move forward, just kind of like we normally do. Next slide. Here is our draft of the input parameters for an unconfined aquifer. As you can see, there are some changes from what we've probably seen in the past, but we've done some of the basic things of wells, pond stream. The differences here are that there will be available inputs for T and S, so that's transmissivity and sortivity. And some of the parameters are pretty much the same. You will be able to add them to the table. You can see that little button at the bottom. From this page, you'll be able to basically match the DNS and add supporting documentation for that. Add a whole bunch of different ones to your table. This will be available for O3 Wordingo as well. Sure, add them to your table, and then you'll be able to go to the next slide, which will look like this. It's kind of a summary of all of your parameters. Before you run it, you'll be able to delete the ones that you think, oh, I accidentally, made a typo or something, and delete a line. And then you hit run here, it will run all of them. It's kind of like a run of all the simulations. That will give you next page that looks like this. You have all your run options on the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever amount that we can get to run. You'll also be able to download all of the results under that little run table there. On the right-hand side, it should look pretty familiar from what the tool already looks like. We have a graph there. Hard to display in a PowerPoint, but if you were to scroll down on that page on the right-hand side, you would see all of the parameters, all of the results. You would see what's debited, the amount that's debited. You kind of see those lines in here. It's really hard and sorry. From here, you would select on your run side which one you actually want to proceed with. And then that button there that says proceed with selected would carry you to the next page.
So Megan, to be clear, you would have to highlight which run on the left column and then click on the proceed with selected run.
You have added, that's kind of different, is you can add a site name on here. A lot of farmers in particular name their fields, so we're hoping that this will be an easier way for them to keep track of which registration goes with which fields. Before the exact information we're asking for before. The next screen. Then you're gonna get your registration. Whoa! It looks pretty much the same as your own registration. The only thing that's kind of different is on the right-hand side, where you can kind of see it's grayed out a little bit. Blue out a little bit. Those will be the hydrogeological parameters that have been put in on the bottom section of that input.
Yeah, important to note here that it looks like a long list. You will only see the ones that are applicable for whatever solution on 99, 03, where you are actually using it. This is a
draft to show everything, but it will only talk about the openings. About what, there's gonna be a blast email sent out in the next week or so. This is kind of gonna give like top 10 things, new features on the tool. The tool will be in my login. To access it. There'll be like a little demo video. Third party. So there'll be a little demo video of being like, all right, you guys, you're not doing set up the phone. There'll be directions on how to do that on our website. We'll point to that as well. Yep. And then we'll link to our website and maybe one other tutorial video. Yeah, we're hoping to get one out before the last week if possible. And there'll be a way for you guys to subscribe to future news, information, things like that on the web if you choose to. So, yeah.
So could there be a registration after going through a bunch of scenarios and choosing, and we still ready to go to a site specific?
It depends on your results, just like the tool does. If you were to put in, if you were manually put in TNS, it will go automatically to site specific review. If TNS will pre-populate based on our data that we currently have, and if you don't touch them and it passes like normal, it just goes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a tiny, the screen is so small. There's a tiny little flag that's like, it says anything under this line, if you edit it is correct. It's hard to see. Can you guys include the water use advisory council folks in the email? So it's anyone that's ever registered through the anyone that's ever reported water use in your guys.
So is it possible for you guys to make like a short paragraph kind of article explaining like this is coming? Because I would love to share that. Because
that is the point of the email. Yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, we can share that as well.
You'll get it.
Are you guys gonna send something out of the My Environment? Or
yes, so the majority of that email, but not all that email will go out. The like last paragraphs, I guess. Yeah, it'll be distributed through multiple rounds of communication. But everyone will know. And Kelly, I was just talking with Leah this morning. We're gonna sit down with our media team to, see what's good for member communication, whether it's videos or articles or social media or however that looks. We'll share that with anybody who's interested who wants to use that material for.
So I'd like, just confirming, you can still play with the map, select screens, get the information, additional screen type, all that.
Yeah, I'll look at that stuff. Yeah.
But you have to go through my login.
You'll have to.
Don't have to get my account with my login. So I wanted to add a good segue. So we did actually release a new data set for water use reporting. However, there was some miscommunication with PG&E, so right now people are severed from access. Looking over from, well, we're in the intermediate stage. Because we're switching over from my login for citizens, my login is it's not going to be not necessary. That's sweet.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
So that it's not March 29th and everybody's calling you. I mean, they'll call you anyway, but still.
Any other questions on that segment? We do have to circle back. I had a question online from Todd. He said, is the APT guidance document going to be universal? Public water supply systems are quite different than a farm irrigation well. Is the Michigan Water Withdrawal Assessment Tool testing going to be the same as testing for the drinking water?
Right now, that's kind of in drinking water stands is to decide what they want.
Would you say that louder? They're having a hard time on it.
Feels like I'm shouting now, so
Yes.
I apologize for all the people.
Oh, okay. All right. Well.
I can just hear my own voice in my head, I suppose. That's with drinking water, right? Like the decision to use that as their guidance document isn't necessarily something that we'll be deciding in GRD. It's the guidance document that we would like to see used for collection of those parameters to update the information that would then lead to an SSR in the new WA tool. But then ultimately it's their decision to decide whether or not they want to update their guidance document or not.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you heard that, Todd. It's I think there's gonna be 2 companion documents, like a Drinking Water Plus.
Well, it's my understanding right now that they want to use it.
Right.
But ultimately I don't have.
I think Todd might just be asking for clarity.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, out of what you need for this program, you're not gonna add additional things that drinking water needs for their purposes and require those of people.
Drinking
for
water
this
is
program.
less than.
Yeah. Right.
That he was looking at.
I think that's correct, but.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think he's satisfied.
Okay.
Okay, back to you.
Okay. Oops, one final thing, some personnel updates. So we completed the interviews for our geologist 12 position, doing reference checks right now, and then the committee will meet to select a candidate. We completed interviews for filling the vacant section secretary position, and interviews are scheduled, first round of interviews are scheduled tomorrow for geologist 9 through 11, doing SSRs in the unit, possibly with a second round, depending on what has been scheduled. I'm only aware of tomorrow. Sufficient until tomorrow or the evils thereof, anyways. So with that wraps up the program update.
All right. Any other questions for Jim before we move on? Seeing none, the next 2 dates for the meetings are October 14th and the 9th. And for those of you that are not aware, Constitution Hall is now Stabenow Hall. So you see that name change. We're still in the same place, different names. I do want to extend the thanks to Frank for hosting, and for I owe you 25. Anybody else who owes for lunch, please square up with Frank.
Please do.
So, I'm sorry. Okay, and then one more comment. Oh, right. No, I've got that. Thank you. So I don't think we need to talk about formats or quorums, but I think getting out of Lansing has been a great thing. So once it's summer, I think is welcome. So thank you for that again, Frank. And then we do have open comment or a public comment on any open item. So if there's any public comment, we'll wait to see if there's anything online. Looking at anybody in the room. Going once, twice. All right, sold. We're out of here. Thank you very much for everybody's time. Appreciate it. Good. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
So